Okay, so as they used to say on Saturday Night Live, the Industrial Revolution was neither industrial nor was it a revolution. Discuss. You can keep talking about whatever you want to. Sorry. Anyway, I just. Okay, my email, probably just the easiest one would be Subway Soul, SUBWAYSOUL @gmail.com. We really need to, I guess we really need to get one at Finding God in Culture. I need to get one there. So, because what we really hope is that when you guys continue to consume culture, that you will be able to analyze it and discuss it. And we would love to hear from you. So, I don't know what it says in the show notes. There might be something in the show notes. If not, I'll make sure that something in the show notes gets there about texting us, because Drew and I would love to hear from you. So
here's a question. Do you have other sources, other podcasts, other reference material that you listen to hear their thoughts and opinions on culture generally?
Okay, so I was just asked, is there another podcast that I listen to and pay attention to their thoughts on culture? And the answer to that is sort of. Because what I'm doing, I was telling somebody back in the back this morning, a lot of times what I'm doing is I have to write at least 2 things each week, right? That I'm gonna send out for not for our eyes and our ears only. And let me tell you something, not everything I write, not everything I watch am I going to write about. Like there's a particular television show, if you ask me later what it is, I watched it, I really enjoyed it. I thought it had some amazing moments. I thought it brought about some very interesting and unique angles at something that's very popular in the culture right now. But there was enough negative in it that I decided I'm not going to write about it. And so when somebody talks to me one-on-one, I go, oh, yeah, I saw that. Matter of fact, I really liked it. But I wish they would have left this, this, and this out of it. And they go, yeah, I wish they'd have left that out of there too. And so I just didn't go ahead and throw it out there. We haven't really started. We're just talking. And so, it was one of those things. So there's a podcast called Makers and Mystics, and my friend Drew listens to a lot more of those type of podcasts. And what Drew will do is Drew will listen to stuff. He sends it to me. I'll listen to it, and then we will reference it in the show. And sometimes we reference things in the show that he's listened to and I haven't even listened to. But we try to have somewhat of an intelligent conversation about it. And I was telling somebody else this morning, the podcast that I listen to, almost everything I find because of my wife, because my wife is my curator. She listens to podcasts over and over and over again when she's sitting at her desk, and she'll send it to me. She says, you have to listen to this. Make sure you listen to this story. Make sure you listen to this. I mean, she started me on The Moth. She started me on Go Fact Yourself. She started me on, so many different things. And I just love it. And she finds TV shows for us too. Sometimes I don't know that the TV show's out, and she does, because she hears about it on NPR or whatever. And she goes, I think we should watch this show. And sometimes I go, oh, I heard about this. But a lot of times it's like, where'd you hear about this? So yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. And so I should probably listen to more of that kind of stuff. I'll be honest with you too, though. A lot of what we end up doing on the podcast comes from our reading. So there's Makoto Fujimura. Does anybody know Makoto Fujimura? Okay, his book, Art and Faith, is absolutely worth its weight in gold. Makoto Fujimura. And so we did a whole episode on Art and Faith by Makoto Fujimura. And so, we're finding new things. So has anybody in here ever heard of James K.A. Smith? James K.A. Smith. Please do yourself a favor and write that name down. James K.A. Smith. He wrote a book last year called How to Inhabit Time. He wrote another book about, it's about love, and I can't remember the title of it right now. But he wrote a book called On the Road with St. Augustine. And his book, On the Road with St. Augustine, caused us to do probably 2 of the podcasts that we did way back, not long after we had started. James K.A. Smith is one of the most brilliant men I have ever read, and he happens to be a magnificent writer. He writes with such precision. I just have to stop and put the book down because it's so beautiful sometimes. And I just have to go, all right, I'm just going to think about that for a little while. And it's one of those things that I text people quotes from, and all that kind of stuff, because it's just so powerful. But James K. A. Smith, his book, How to Inhabit Time, that book, On the Road with St. Augustine. He's got a new book. I've already bought it, but I haven't even started it yet. He actually teaches at Calvin College in Grand Rapids. So we're about as close as we're going to get to him right now, for today anyway, unless you go across the border. Were there any other questions before we got started? Because we're just giving a few minutes for people to come in. This is a good way to at least get us headed in the right direction.
Hey, Dan.
Yeah.
The podcast does have an email subscribe link.
Okay. It has an email subscribe link on it, but does it have an email where they can send us something?
No.
See, that's what we need to do.
I didn't see that.
I'll work on that because I know he got findinggodinculture.com. I think he picked that up for us. So I'll work on that and we'll try to get that in the show notes. But that'd be great. I'll give you guys my phone number too if you're interested. Texts are a good way to get a hold of people. Is it okay if I give a phone number? Is that cool? I mean, you don't have to write it down. It's 317-695-6351. That's 317-695-6351. And I'm going to tell you something. I was asking here this morning, what are some of the questions that kids are asking? We have this summer staffer, and I didn't even know him. So we went on retreat back at the beginning of the summer, and as we're sitting there, he happens to know, he proves that he knows a little bit about music. And not only did he know a little bit about music, but I found out he was in the music creation and production program at the school he was going to or something like that. And I was very intrigued by him. And he looked at me and goes, "You ever heard this band?" And I go, "I don't think so." And so he sent me that band. You know what he did before the week was over with? He sent me his music. And his music is spectacular. And I was listening to it, and I probably shouldn't use that word for it, but I was pumping that music when we went in downtown, and we're all leaving town, and I'm pumping it in my Honda Element that has a subwoofer in it, and I got it pumped all the way up. And he gets out of the car and he goes, "Oh, I like that," and it's just really cool. But you know what? He constantly sends me music. And I said, bring it. I need to be introduced to more and more new stuff. And so I would love for you to send me information about that kind of stuff you're finding too. So anything else? All right, let's see. What time is it? We're about 20 after. Oh, 16 after. I'm pretty close. All right. My boss from the camp just texted me. Very cool. All right. So, would you do me a favor? What a beautiful afternoon we have together, right? Let's be still and know that God is God. Let's be still and wait patiently for the Lord. Magnificent and holy God, what a gift it is and a privilege it is to be here in this place, to be in this room with people that I love, people that I've known for a long time, and for people that I'm just now getting to know. And I just thank you, Father, that you are continuing to speak and that we, your servants, get to listen. Thank you for loving us into this moment. And I pray that you would help us to be attentive as we enjoy it together. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right. So if you have your sheets from the first day, if you'll go with me to we'll get there in just a second, but if you'll go to page 17, under the Consider This section. But while you're turning there, I want to ask you a couple questions, all right? Because we've talked about this week, and so let's just see what we remember. All right. What chapter of the book of Acts were we talking about?
17.
It's Acts chapter 17. And Paul goes into this city, and he is provoked. He is disturbed. He is bothered by all of the religious stuff that he sees around him, okay? And as I was reading the description of this town. You know, it's 3 miles inland to get to Athens from the harbor, okay? And when you get out at the harbor, there's all of these, the stuff about the gods is right there in front of you, okay? And you can see the temple to Athena up there. And just a little bit down from the temple of Athena is the Areopagus where they would meet, the ridge there. And as he's walking up, everywhere he looks, he sees these things, okay? And not only that, he even finds, as he's walking, uses that as his open door to say, hey, I want to introduce you to this God that you need to know. And I so hope that after you and I have had the conversations we've had this week, that we're going to be looking for those open doors, that we're going to be finding those cracks that we can just walk right into them and walk right up to them and have real conversations with people about things that matter. Because earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush is afire with God, but only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit around and pluck blackberries. I'm trying to help people become more barefoot in their lives. People always make fun of me because I take off my shoes a lot. But I take off my shoes because I need to be reminded that I'm standing on holy ground. And you know what? I'm on holy ground everywhere I'm at. There is no division between sacred and secular. When I go to Village Kitchen this afternoon, which is what I hope I will do here after a while, I hope when I sit there that I will have an opportunity to pray over my food and that I will be able to enjoy some fruit of the forest, sugar-free pie, because they've got it. It's the only sugar-free pie they've gotten, and I buy it every day. And so I'm going in there and I have conversations with people. It's one of those great places because guess what? They got a counter. So guess where Danny sits? I'm by myself. I sit at the counter. And then guess what? You either have to talk to me or you have to ignore me. It's one of the two, and we just have I've had a great time in there the last couple of days. But and so we've just got to find those open doors. We've got to find those opportunities. And we find those by listening to other people and all those things that we've talked about. But I want to tell you something. Remember what I said yesterday? That he was provoked. It bothered him. It disturbed him. It troubled him. But you couldn't tell that when he started speaking to them. There are things that are going to mess with our soul. We're going to hear musicians say things, or we're going to hear actors say things when they're not on stage. Like I've had so many people go, well, you can't watch that actor because that actor did this one time. And I go, well, I'm going to watch him or I'm going to watch her. You know why? She's created in the image of God. So is he. And you know what? It is my responsibility to love and to pray for this person, even if I don't know them. It doesn't mean I can't still learn something from them, even if I disagree with them. I think we've got a long way to go in the church in realizing how to take the gospel out into the world. Because we don't understand, because we've spent so much time with that first way of acting and reacting to culture and responding to it. We isolate. We insulate. We circle the wagons. Well, we got to keep everybody safe here. I'm going to tell you something. I don't think Jesus was that worried about safe. He was called a glutton, a drunkard, and a friend of sinners. All the tax collectors and sinners gathered to listen to him speak. You've heard me say these things this week. So isolation is not the best form, okay? So then what about accommodation? I like it, I love it, I want some more of it. No, it doesn't work because there's good, there's bad, and there's ugly. You have to know the difference. You have to be able to discern. You have to be able to decipher. You have to be able to weigh and measure what you are watching and seeing and hearing and experiencing. You have to. And by the way, let me just say this at this particular moment. Please do realize that one of the things I say all the time, I really mean it. You shouldn't be watching anything that you're not talking about. We need to be conversing about this stuff. We spend so much of our time in America escaping, and I don't think we should ever escape. We need to engage and transform, which is the third one. And we need to constantly be engaging and transforming. We need to never disengage our brains. We need to be demolishing arguments and pretensions that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we need to take captive every thought and make them obedient to Christ. It is my responsibility to go out into this world and to be Jesus for other people. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I do a really lousy job of it. But you know what? I'm going to try to do a better job of it today than I did yesterday. The last thing anybody in this world needs is Danny. They need Jesus. And what I want to do is I want to let more and more of him every day. Is it not wonderful when you think about the words of old John the Baptist when he said, he must become greater and greater and I must become less and less? Can I tell you something funny about that verse? So I had a ministry years ago to ministers, and we called it Day Ministries, Delta Epsilon Iota. Anybody in here know Greek? There's a real problem with calling that ministry Day. Does anybody know why? It would be day if it's Latin, and maybe Dei, but Epsilon Iota forms a diphthong in the Greek, and guess what the diphthong sound is? I. It's die. I called my youth minister as I was walking into Walmart this week, and I go, I have said that word wrong all of these years. Do you know how I feel? And then I said, you know what's really funny? Let me tell you the journey God has had me on. My life verse, I told somebody one time, I said, my life verse is, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. I told that to a group of students as we were getting ready to go on a mission trip. And I looked at them and I said, and it's a lie. And they all went, what? Because I haven't died. I still hadn't died to myself. And can I tell you something? I'm still dying to myself. Because guess what? I got to die to myself every day. I normally wear skull rings. I didn't wear them this week, so we didn't have to have any conversations about that. But the skull ring reminds me I got to die to myself. And I need that reminder, just like I need to have my shoes off sometimes. Well, then there was this song by a guy by the name of Van Morrison. Anybody remember him? Brown Eyed Girl. Got some bad stuff in that song, just in case you never listened to it. People just go, oh, I love Brown Eyed Girl. Well, there's some stuff in there. But anyway, so Brown Eyed Girl, and he wrote a new album after he came to Christ. And in this album, he asked a question. And in this question is this. He goes, when will I ever learn to live in God? And I got into my journal and I started writing. I'm like, when will I ever learn to live in God? When will I ever learn to live in God? And God told me one day, he goes, you're asking the wrong question. What? That's a pretty important question. I mean, I got to learn how to live in God. He goes, when will you ever learn to die in me? And as I was walking into Walmart this week, I went, still ain't dead yet. May there be more of Christ and less of me every day. So in order to do that, in order to engage and transform, what do? I have to isolate. And I isolate just like we've been isolating together this week. And we have watched movie clips and we have listened to rock and roll and we have talked about culture and how to interact with culture. We've talked about scripture and what scripture means. And we're going to read a lot today. And I apologize. One of you walked in today and said, what is it, movies or music today? I was like, if you need me to go get the movie clips, I'll get them. But anyway, there's a lot I want us to cover today. And so hopefully we'll enjoy that together. Any questions about that brief? Did I cover everything? Because I sometimes get myself distracted. Is that cool? Are we good? Any questions? All right, 17. Okay, let's go to page 17. And you do know that we haven't unpacked Acts 17. I know that. We don't have time to unpack that and do all the other things. But anyway, please pay attention to that. And don't forget Craig Keener. He will help you in that. So consider this. Let's just go right there for the for the first one there. It says, look for the good. Okay. If you don't have a copy of this, if you'll say something to me, I'll send it to you digitally, or I'll go get a copy made for you. All right. This is the quote. It says, look for the good. Become known as connoisseurs of good culture. Curate that stuff out. Able to recognize and to pick it out in a fallen world. That's what we're trying to do. We're looking for those moments in which God shows up. Because really, God's messages are coming. Remember, he still frames with pagan lenses. He still writes with pagan pens. And he still sings in pagan chorus. And we could go further. He still paints with pagan paintbrushes. Okay? I mean, the list just goes on. And one day I'm going to write it out, hopefully. And I'll remember more than just the first three. But anyway, look for that good culture and pick it out in the fallen world. Instead of being offended when confronted with darkness, suggests Michael Metzger, be provoked to get involved. Is that not exactly what Paul did? It offended him. It bothered him that they had all of these false gods. It provoked him, and he did something about it. He had conversations in the agora, the marketplace. And then the people in the marketplace said, you might need to come talk to these other people who are always talking about the new things. And then he goes and he talks to them, and then so forth and so on. All right. And then it goes on to this. It says, challenge yourself to find something good in all things and identify the redemptive nature of humanity and its place in creating a better world. Okay. I'm out there and I'm on the hunt. I'm on the hunt. And I tell you what, I love finding God in the unexpected places. So this morning I talked a little bit about what I do, and I'm going to tell you something. I love teaching the Gospels. I love studying the Gospels. I studied some more in Ephesians, after I talked this morning. And Ephesians is blowing my mind. I don't even know how in the world I'm going to try to unpack 10 verses in the book of Ephesians. I don't know how you can unpack one verse in the book of Ephesians. Hey, Paul, I don't even want to say that. I'll say it tonight. So anyway, there's a lot in Ephesians. And I love studying, and I love learning, and I've learned so much already today, because there's so much more for me to learn. But can I tell you something? Oh my goodness. I lost track of my mind. Paul and Ephesians they've already distracted me. What was I saying? Somebody help me. Yeah, I think I might have to go on. But we were talking about, this idea that there's always so much more for us to learn, and we need to be provoked, but not be provoked because I'm always looking, because I know what it was. Thank you. All right, so here's what it was. Forgive my mind. My mind's really having a hard time today. But here's the deal. This is so amazing. I'm going to distract myself again. It's so amazing to find God in the scriptures. I love it. It brings me to life. I start going crazy. I call my friends. I text them. I'll go out and yell in the backyard. I just get alive. I love it. Can I tell you something? I'm almost as crazy and as wild and as excited when I find him where he's not supposed to be. Well, where people say he's not. Because if you were to ask him, he would tell you, I'm there. And I love finding him in those songs and in those movies and in those television shows. I love the way he shows up. And I love the fact that then I can have real conversations with people about how he has shown up and how he can show up in their lives. Does that make sense? All right, let's move down two more. Go skip that next quote for a second. Not that I don't like it. Does anybody know who Sho Baraka is? Anybody know Sho Baraka? Sho Baraka is a Christian rapper, okay? And he happens to be an absolutely brilliant rapper, and he's a brilliant human being. I've heard him speak, and he's just fantastic. His book, He Saw That It Was Good, is an excellent book. All right. And it will challenge some of you, because some of the things he's going to say you're going to disagree with. And that's fine, because they're probably up for some serious debate and discussion. But I want you to look at this one. Jesus didn't die just for us to avoid sin and temptation. He also died for us to push back darkness and to walk among the grotesque. Is that not a fantastic quote? I have held on to that word grotesque there. He didn't die for us to just avoid sin and temptation. No, incarnation comes in the middle of sin. It comes in the middle of sin, and he lives here, and he's tempted in all ways like we are, yet he was without sin. He was a man of sorrows, and he was acquainted with grief. He was in the mess That's what incarnation's all about. And there are so many Christians who all they do is live in the clean. Baraka goes on in that next one. He'll talk about it. He talks about if you have too much light in your life, guess what? You still can't see if you've got too much light. You eventually are blinded by the light. And he talks about being able to understand and decipher and discern and to be able to walk there. Jesus didn't just die for us to avoid sin and temptation. He died for us so that we might so that we might push back the darkness and walk among the grotesque. Oh my goodness. I love that Shobaraka quote. All right, now let's go down a little bit more because we've been talking about stories. If you go down halfway down on page 18, and for some of you who have a page 19, guess what? It could be halfway down on 19 too, because 18 and 19 are the same page. Sorry, I don't know how that happened. But anyway, if you go down there, there's a quote from Steve Jobs. This is what Steve Jobs says. Okay, he says, the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. I lost it the first time I came across that quote. Because you know what? I've told you this yesterday. I'll tell you this today. I'll tell you this tomorrow when we talk again. I am trying to become a better storyteller every day. It's why I consume the media that I consume, to be more deeply connected with the human condition and to become a more effective storyteller. Because people remember stories. You're not going to remember me. You know why? Because it doesn't matter. But you know what? We'll remember the stories that we've shared. We'll remember the experiences that we've had together. And storyteller is the most powerful person in the world. Let's look down at that next quote. Anybody ever read Sue Monk Kidd? Sue Monk Kidd's a great writer. Okay. Again, she believes in Jesus, but you and her might have some real conversations about what that looks like. This is what she says. Stories have to be told or they die. And when they die, we can't remember who we are or why we're here. Listen to this one more time. Stories have to be told or they die. And when they die, we can't remember who we are or why we're here. Talk to me. What do you hear in those words? I've been telling you what I hear in these words. What do you hear in those words? Stories have to be told or they die. And when they die, we can't remember who we are or why we're here.
The importance of a parent or grandparent telling you a story over and over is because they're hoping you grab hold of who they were, what they were, how they were, and pick up on that. And let that give life into you and part of your story. See,
and that's not even where I'd have gone with it. That's why I love having Nathan Bright in the room. Because that's beautiful, because he went immediately to generational storytelling. And you know, I know Twyla. And because I know Twyla, I know something about Nathan. And because I know something about Nathan, I know something about Nadia and Nevaeh. Yeah, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Because this is huge. Yeah, so the stories have to be told. Can I tell you something? I don't understand why parents don't spend more time telling their children how they fell in love. That's important. You need to know where that started. And when you get to hear those stories about how that started and then how it continued, guess what? It'll help you do a better job of falling in love with somebody when you have your chance.
Well, Danny, they don't even have to be good stories. They could be bad stories.
Yeah, we just need to know these stories. You know, I heard a story this past week. There's a family experiencing some serious brokenness, okay? And there's a rift in this family, and this daughter won't talk to her grandmother. Because the daughter has made some choices and she knows the grandmother would disagree with them. A friend of mine said to the grandmother, did you happen to bother to ever tell her that you were pregnant with your mom when you got married? Oh, no, that never came up. My friend said to them, do you know if you were to maybe have that conversation with them about your mistakes, it might open an opportunity for you to have a real conversation with them about what you disagree with them about. And these things don't even come to our mind. We don't even think about how our stories matter and how our stories have to be told. They have to be told for us. See, if we don't tell our stories, they die. And we don't remember who we are or why we're here. And guess what? If we don't share our stories with each other, then they die and we don't know why we're here or who we are either. And can I tell you something? God built us for community. We belong to each other. And I can't make sense of this without you. I don't know why. Every time I look at you, I just am so happy because of that day you and I met in Cincinnati. You signed for me years ago, I think, one night, and you were like, you could talk slower. And I remember, that's what I remember. And I can't talk slower because I get in there and there's so many things I want to say and I just say them so fast. And then I get done and I'm like, I don't even remember what I just said because I studied and I put this stuff together. I thought about things or whatever. I saw him in Cincinnati, Mr. Eubanks in Cincinnati. And I had a mask on because my wife had just been exposed to COVID. I'm walking out. He knew who I was. I love it when somebody recognizes somebody in a mask. And we shook hands, and I was like, I probably shouldn't have shaken your hand. I didn't get COVID, by the way, so there you go. And hopefully you didn't. And okay. But it was just that moment. I just love seeing him. I need him in my life. I need the gift that is Mr. Eubanks. I need the gift that is David Manick. I need the gift that is all of these people. I need it. We need each other, and we have to tell our stories. And our stories belong in community. They belong in community. They do not belong on a shelf. So anyway, all right. Anybody have anything else they want to say about that? Let's go to this last one. This last one's a long one. If you'll let me tell you this. This is from Let Me Tell You a Story by Mark Yaconelli. Anybody remember Mike Yaconelli? Mike Yaconelli was one of the co-founders of Youth Specialties. Mark is his son. Mark is absolutely off the charts brilliant. He wrote a book about hard things a couple years ago that absolutely was transformative for me. He also wrote a book on contemplative youth ministry, some of those kinds of things. So anyway, oh my goodness, it's 40 after. All right. You're a Shawnee, he declared. Shawnee, he explained, is a Gaelic word meaning story catcher. In traditional Irish towns, a story catcher's role was to unearth, gather, and share stories to strengthen and bind people to one another. Lower me down into a seemingly empty, colorless place, a fast food restaurant, a warehouse chain store, a gray office cubicle, and I will excavate a story that will break your heart, a true story that will burst your sides with laughter and unlock all that's bound up in you, a story that will aim you like the North Star towards whatever is true and right. I have to set loose my compassionate imagination. I have to be a vulnerable listener. I have to allow my own fears and wounds to be accessible, touched, made known within the mumbled and tossed aside. Made known within the listening. I try to listen to what is said and what isn't said. I listen to the silence, the words mumbled and tossed aside. Often the first story that someone tells me isn't even the story that they long to tell. The first story is what got them in the door, while the real story waits in the car. The first story is crafted to entertain, to please, to get a laugh, to grab attention. But behind that story, waiting in the wings, is the truth, the real story they long to tell. This is the work of the story catcher, to hear the unspoken story and invite it out into the open. Sorry, I messed that up when I was reading there. Is that not beautiful? Drop me into a seemingly colorless place. Can I tell you something? There are no colorless places. Vincent van Gogh will remind you of that. You know one of the things Vincent van Gogh said one time? I never get tired of the blue sky. How often are we tired of the blue sky? Vincent wasn't. Thanks be to God he wasn't. What a painter. What a mind. What a heart. So to become Shawnees, to become story catchers, to become people who are able to realize that stories are there, the stories that make a difference, the story that change us, the stories that unlock everything that's bound up in us, they're actually there right in front of us. We have to set loose our compassionate imagination. We have to be vulnerable listeners and allow our fears and our wounds to be accessible and to be touched and to be made known within the listening. And we listen to the silences. We listen to the silences, to that which is mumbled and tossed aside. If you don't hear what that person is saying to you, ask them what they're saying again. Because again, oftentimes the story that they're giving you and the story, can I say this real quick? The story that we're so offended by and that we believe that they are so lost because of is not even the story. We don't know what baggage people bring to the terminal. And yet we're ready to judge them and to write them off in an instant. It's time to see past the walls. It's time to build bridges and to make common ground. And you know what? That's why I pay attention to all this junk I pay attention to, this crazy rock and roll music and stuff. I just want to have stuff to talk about to people, and I want to find God in it, and I want to help other people find God in it. And I want people to find a place where they know they are loved. And you know what? The place that they are loved should be right here wherever I am. And can I tell you something? It should be right there wherever you are. I go back to what I said about the TV show The Bear the first day, and I tell you, the guy was Black Sheep Baptist online. I know who he was. He talked about how the kitchen has become a place where misfits belong. And he says, I wonder how come the church is no longer the place where misfits belong. Oh, if we could just welcome people, if we could just love people like Jesus loved them and bring them in. Any questions? How about you come back with some things? I've talked about a couple of these quotes. I've hit a couple things. Talk to me. What's going on in your head? Argue with me. Debate with me. Tell me I'm dumb. I'm okay with that. Let's.
You know, as preachers and missionaries, a lot of stories, and they probably need to be told, but we're limited as far as how we can tell them because it can bring pain to some of the people. How do we deal with those?
All right, excellent. So he says there are stories that need to be told, and sometimes there's a lot of pain involved in telling those stories. Well, first of all, I think we do the hard work of spending enough time with the people who have experienced the pain, and then we help them tell their own story. That's one of the ways. Because I think we truly miss. I'm gonna get myself in trouble here, but this is the real truth. Loving people will cost you your life. Now, you might not die on a tree. He did. But it will cost you your life because you're going to have to say, well, what I'd really like to do is go over there and do that right now. But I don't get to do that because this broken person is right here. And let me tell you something. That broken person is beating the ever-living tar out of you. I know. I had a friend tell me this morning, he goes, that person is terrible to you. I go, I know. God brought them into my life. I don't get to write them off. Now, is there a time to write somebody off? Yeah, those are the bigger discussions. But that's my immediate answer, is that we need to spend the time with the people, and we've got to help people tell their own stories. All right, so this would be a great time to go to the Moth. There's a couple pages in there about the Moth. There's a bunch of quotes about how to tell stories at the Moth, and then there's a Moth Story Slam sheet. And feel free to look at that later. But they say, you know, it's true stories told in front of a live audience without notes. And they actually sit with these people and they help them shape and form their stories in a way that it will be interesting to others, and they help them walk through the pain to get to the place where they can share the story. I think that's some of the holiest work we do. Some of the holiest work we do is helping people realize that their stories matter. I remember a few years ago, I was on sabbatical, and I was riding a motorcycle, and I go flying way out. My goal was to get to this. You guys will know how crazy I am, and you'll know how abstract random I am. Because basically, here's what happened. I was going to go, and I was going to drive all the way out through the Badlands, and then out into Wyoming. That's where I was headed. Because I wanted to go back out and I wanted to spend some time in the Grand Tetons and, maybe even drive through Yellowstone. It's not as cool as Grand Tetons, but that's my opinion. So anyway, I get on a motorcycle and I start riding. I had to borrow a motorcycle, didn't have one at the time. You know how far I got? Iowa. That's as far as I got. I ran into people. I ended up having conversations with people. They'd tell me about places. I'd go to those places. I'd come back. I just never made it that far. And it's crazy to be able to do that kind of stuff. And I don't remember why I was telling you that story. But I mean, it's this idea that I walked with some people even in pain. It's crazy how some people will walk up to me and start telling me their deep, dark secrets. I just was like, thank you. And so we have to be those people who are in those spaces and that we love in those spaces well enough and make our wounds visible enough. I mean, you know, I don't look like a preacher. I don't want to look like a preacher. And by the way, what does a preacher look like anyway? Because we've made these boundaries and these, I don't want to do that. You know how I got my job at Midas? The Midas owner looked at the owner of a ministry, the executive director of a ministry, and he said to him, you don't know anybody that doesn't look like a minister who could come and love my guys, do you? He goes, yeah, I do. And I've been there since 2009. So I think this is a great question you're asking. And so the moth helps people frame those things. And we need to have storytelling clubs in our churches, and we need to have storytelling nights in our homes, and we need to be inviting people in, and we need to be telling our stories, and we need to be sharing our pain. Because when we share our pain, guess what? Other people are willing to share their pain. And when we share our failures. So let me tell you something I believe about discipleship. I believe that discipleship, I think intermission is one of the most important things that I do in my life, because guess what? These guys have had to put up with me for 4 and 5 months at a time.
And they're listening anyway.
Yeah, and they come here of their own accord. I didn't make them. And here's what's so great. Can I tell you something? They have seen me do good things. Once. They have seen me mess up 1 billion times. And that's the beauty. It's life on life. And if you're going to be like Jesus, it's going to take life on life, and you're going to have to allow people to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and help you become more like Christ. That's a great question. Is that a decent enough answer? All right. Anybody else have a question? I love that. And let's keep talking about it. That's great. Anybody else think I didn't answer the question well enough? I mean, seriously, this is what we're here for. Yeah, back here.
I love what you're talking, and we are going to encourage in our church in terms of relational outreach, and friendships with your neighbors. We're not projects with your neighbors who love your neighbors, that sort of thing. But there are times where you come up against something that's tension because of a lifestyle, marriage arrangement that completely conflicts with your understanding of the Creator's design. You've been invited into this. And to me, I think those are equal. We see those kinds of invitations, and they're reflective of, oh man, I guess do the right thing, because it's really complicated situation, and it wouldn't be if I questioned myself. So the good thing, you're in that. There are times where, in my mind, if I attend this event, I am affirming something that completely flies in the face of what the Creator has designed. That's just a particular example.
What do you say?
How do you maintain that relationship and yet also remain consistent with your belief system and convictions? And there are times where it's going to come head to head.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious how you handle those particular kinds of circumstances.
Yeah, so I'm going to really summarize what you said, because one thing you said I couldn't even hear, so I apologize. I hope but my brother was talking about how there's, when we go out and try to love people in the world, we're going to run into these obvious moments of absolute tension in which we say, if I were to attend that, or if I were to be around that, then I'm affirming something that I don't believe in. Yeah, and so, yeah, how do you do that? Well, I mean, again, I think we have to be real, and we don't ever fake this stuff. Okay, we're not faking this stuff. And you know what you said? I love the phrase you said, that these people are not projects. They're not projects. I'm supposed to love these guys, or I'm supposed to love these people. And so what I've got to do is I don't come up with the 5 verses that I need to share with these people before I go and see them. First of all, I think it comes with this whole idea of we've isolated long enough that we know the word. And I'm going to isolate again today, and I'm going to isolate again tomorrow, and I'm going to isolate again the next day, so I know the word. So I don't have to, I don't have to pull out my Bible and look it up. I can have real conversations with people. I have often given advice to people in secular settings, and all I've given them was scriptural advice every time. They have no idea. They say, that's a really good idea. I go, well, thank you. It's not mine. It was Jesus. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. And so I think what we do is there are times we'll have to draw a line. But if you've loved somebody well enough and you've listened to somebody long enough and you've had enough care about this person and about what they are experiencing, then you can look at them and go, you do realize I'm probably not going to make that. I'll buy you a coffee and let's sit and talk for a few minutes, and I'll tell you why I'm probably not going to make that. It does not have any reflection upon the fact of whether I love you or not, because I love you. And as a matter of fact, in this moment, I love you more than I've ever loved you. And when I see you the next time, I'll love you more than I ever loved you this time, because you matter to me. And that might be the way I deal with it, just to have that conversation. Because again, I've listened long enough to have a conversation. See, the problem is we walk in talking. And I know y'all are sitting there going, you actually be quiet? I do. Because you know what? If I'm meeting somebody on their turf, that's their turf. I got plenty to say. But nobody cares about what I have to say until I've proved that I care enough about them. Yeah. And a lot of times, those situations you're talking about, we also are going to have to fight 30 years of bad religious experience. Or the awful coworker at work who keeps making their stupid potshot comments at them. See, we have to fight all that. But you know what? Jesus did it. And Jesus looked at the scribes and Pharisees and he said, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You travel to and fro across land and sea to make a proselyte, and when you do, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. And can I tell you something? I don't think Jesus was mad in those 7 woes. I think his heart was broken. I think sometimes we misunderstand that. Jesus loved the Pharisees. They were the people that were probably going to be close enough to the way he thought. And then, you saw how that worked out. It'll be difficult. So thank you. Hope that's a decent enough answer. All right, let's see. What time are we getting to? Are you serious? All right. We don't even have time to do anything else hardly, but let's try something here. There are two things in your document that I gave you that I hope you'll pay attention to. One of them is from Chasing Francis by Ian Morgan Cron. Okay, Ian Morgan Cron wrote a book about the Enneagram, and he's a brilliant guy. His book Chasing Francis, it's one of the books that I constantly give people, because it's about a guy who was a preacher who said some things from the pulpit that he shouldn't have said. His leadership came to him that afternoon and said, guess what? You just earned yourself 6 months off. And he gets a phone call from his friend who works at the Vatican, and his cousin who works at the Vatican. He says, I want you to come to Italy, and I want you to meet somebody, a good friend of mine. Will you come? And he goes, well, I ain't got nothing else to do, so I'll come. So he flies to Paris. He gets there. They're out for a night. They're eating some amazing pasta. And he goes, where's your friend? And he goes, well, he couldn't make it tonight. Matter of fact, you're not going to be able to see him face to face at all because he died centuries ago. And he goes, you asked me to come to Paris to meet a dead guy? And he goes, well, yeah. Well, why didn't you tell me he was dead? He said, would you have come? And he goes, no. He goes, exactly. And so what he then does is he takes him through all of these sites where Francis of Assisi lived and worked and loved. And it transforms his life. And this story happens to be about a woman that he meets in a record shop, and then they go out on a date together. And it is a fantastic little story. So I would hope that you would read it and listen to it. But what I'm going to do today is we are going to read starting on page 10, and it is page 10. And if you'll forgive me, because I have a microphone, I'll do the reading. Okay. This is from Les Miserables. Okay. You want to talk about finding God in culture? The night that my friend sat across from me and read me this, I lost it. We had Wednesday nights. It was Wednesday night at Danny's. He would show up at 10, and we would start talking about whatever we had read, whatever we had seen, and whatever we had watched. I hope you have a Wednesday night at your house club, okay? He'd come in at 10, and sometimes he wouldn't leave until 2 in the morning. And we would just talk about how God was moving in culture and moving with us. And that helped give birth, I guarantee it, to finding God in culture and all these other things. I'm going to try my best to read this and not mess up the words. Please listen as you hear these words. As we have seen, prayer, celebration, the religious offices, alms, consoling the afflicted, the cultivation of a little piece of ground, fraternity, frugality, hospitality, self-sacrifice, confidence, study, and work filled up each day of his life. Filled up is exactly the phrase. And in fact, the bishop's day was full to the brim with good thoughts, good words, and good actions. Yet it was not complete if cold or rainy weather prevented him from passing an hour or two in the evening when the two women had retired in his garden before going to sleep. It seemed as though it were a sort of right with him to prepare himself for sleep by meditating in the presence of the great spectacle of the starry firmament. Sometimes late at night, if the two women were awake, they would hear him slowly walking the paths. He was out there alone with himself, composed, tranquil, adoring, comparing the serenity of his heart with the serenity of the skies, moved in the darkness by the visible splendors of the constellations and the invisible splendor of God, opening his soul to the thoughts that fall from the unknown. In such moments, offering up his heart at the hour when the flowers of night emit their perfume, lit like a lamp in the center of the starry night, expanding his soul in ecstasy in the midst of creation's universal radiance. Perhaps he could not have told what was happening in the mysterious exchanges of the depths of the soul with the depths of the universe. He contemplated the grandeur and the presence of God, the eternity of the future, that strange mystery, the eternity of the past, a stranger mystery. All the infinities hidden deep in every direction. And without trying to comprehend the incomprehensible, he saw it. He did not study God. He was dazzled by him. He reflected upon the magnificent union of atoms, which give visible forms to nature, revealing forces by recognizing them, creating individualities in unity, proportions in extension, the innumerable in the infinite, and through light producing beauty. These unions are forming and dissolving against a decrepit trellis. These unions are forming and dissolving continually, from which come life and death. He would sit on a wooden bench, leaning against a decrepit trellis, and look at the stars through the irregular outlines of his fruit trees. The quarter of an acre of ground so sparingly planted, so cluttered with shed and ruins, was dear to him and satisfied him. What more was needed by this old man who divided the leisure hours of his life, where he had so little leisure, between gardening in the daytime and contemplation at night? Was this narrow enclosure with the sky for a background not space enough for him to adore God in his most beautiful, most sublime works? Indeed, is that not everything? What more do you need? A little garden to walk in and an immensity to reflect upon. At his feet, something to cultivate and gather. Above his head, something to study and meditate on. A few flowers on earth and all the stars in the sky. Those are the words of Victor Hugo. Is there anything that stands out there? And I apologize, I should have made it a little bit bigger. You know, your eyes can't see as good in the front. But anyway, anything that stands out to you there? This is a man who is happy with his garden, right? I don't know where your garden is, okay? But I want to hope that any place you go to can become your garden. I want to hope that you will go into that place and you will enjoy the shed and the ruins, that you will enjoy the immensity of the sky that you can reflect upon, that you will realize that there is this constant union of atoms that is continuing to create life around you. I hope that you will be in those places and that you will see it. I hope you'll be able to look through the irregular outline of the fruit trees and that you'll recognize that God is meeting you in that place. And I would hope that you wouldn't just study God, but that you would be dazzled by him, and that you would especially be dazzled by him as you walk through this world in the midst of all of these pagan deities, and in the midst of all of the lies that are being told, in the midst of all of the false gods that continue to rear their ugly heads, I pray that you would walk through them and that you would steadily, slowly walk those paths with such loving care and concern that you would always know that earth's crammed with heaven and every common bush is afire with God, and that you would take off your shoes with me and not just sit around and eat blackberries. Amen. See you guys. Have a great day.